Good morning. Thank you for having me.
You got it. The book is called The Trial of Adolf Hitler, and forgive me, the subtitle, The Beer Hall Putsch and the Rise of Nazi Germany. How do you say that word?
That's right, the putsch, yes.
The Putsch.
Yes.
All right, so is this story lost to history, and how did you come to find it?
Well, yeah, I started off interested just in the beer hall putsch itself. When Hitler marches into this beer hall in Munich, he fires his pistol in the air and declares a national revolution. But instead, it looks like it's going to work for a while, but in the end he gets arrested and put in jail, and he's put on trial for high treason. And so I got interested in it. I thought I'd write about the beer hall because it was a very interesting episode, and it's been a long time, about 30 years, since there's been a book. But then I realized there'd never been a book on the trial itself, and I thought the trial was a fascinating moment in history. The authorities had Hitler, and this was a moment that they could have gotten rid of him. He was guilty, and he admitted it, and the law was on the side of the prosecution. So I got very interested in this. I couldn't believe there hadn't been a book on this subject before.
Yeah. Is this the reason why he was in jail, and is this the jail term when he then wrote Mein Kampf?
Yes, it is. Yes. And it's hard to imagine Hitler sitting down and writing a book anyway if he hadn't had the jail sentence, because he's giving speeches, he didn't have the discipline, he's talking, and that was always his favorite means of expression anyway. But the prison gave him time. He had time on his hands.
Wow.
And he had a lot of grievances, a lot of people to try to get his reckoning, to get back at people. And we even have new files from Landsberg prison during Hitler's stay, which allows us to recreate this time more than we had before. It's an incredible source of information. Everybody that visited him in prison, all those files. There's even a prisoner newspaper. Like Hitler and his buddies in prison, they wrote a newspaper among themselves, and one copy survives of that.
Wow. The book is called The Trial of Adolf Hitler. David King, our guest. The book just came out. So this beer hall incident happened in February of 1924. So what happens? Take us through how this beer hall thing happens.
Okay, Hitler tried to take over the government, and when that failed, they ended up marching through the streets. There's a shootout. Hitler goes on the run from the police. We also have the handwritten notes of the lady whose house he hid at during this time, describing Hitler, there at the weekend. But the authorities capture him, and they put him on trial, and the law is clear. Hitler committed high treason, and the law said he should have had a maximum, a long prison stay. And then another law said that foreigners should have been deported from the country. And Hitler is not German, he's Austrian. So he should have, had they followed the law, Hitler should have served a long time in prison and then been kicked out. And Austria was going to accept him, take him back during the trial, but then they dragged their feet, and then eventually Austria would not take him back. But this was an incredible moment in history, I thought. So the authorities had him in their hands. He doesn't.
In a sense, you make it sound like it was the ramblings of a madman just walking into a bar with 9 of his buddies. It could be any type of nut job you hear about now who walks into a bar who's claiming something.
Yeah, that's true. That was the image of Hitler after the putsch, because people were joking. If you're going to take over the country, why don't you go to the military barracks? Why don't you go to a government office? Why don't you go to some place, anywhere except for a beer hall in Munich, not Berlin, by the way. So it became a joke. But the trial, when he gets on the trial, he's able to transform this image of this buffoon, this clown, as he was in a lot of circles in Berlin. They're laughing at him. He's able to turn this around because the judge likes him. The media's covered this incredible detail. And the judge lets Hitler speak hour after hour. And so he's gradually able to transform this image into this, almost, he becomes a hero among the certain audiences.
All right,
let's become like a martyr.
Yeah, let's go back. The book is called The Trial of Adolf Hitler. David King, our guest. Let's talk with the judge. The judge was sympathetic to the cause, was a bad judge. Why did the judge allow this trial to get so out of hand?
This was another thing that really surprised me as I got into it, because if you read all the classic biographies of Hitler, you hear the judge is a nationalist, he likes Hitler, and that is true. That is absolutely true. But I think there is something else even more that's driving him, allowing Hitler to speak. And essentially, Germany had, especially Bavaria, had a lot to hide, and Hitler knew some things on them that 'cause there's a big question: should the trial even be public? A lot of people wanted it to be in secret, and they managed to get the trial in public. And when they did that, Hitler, he now had something on the judge. After World War I, where Germany lost, and they limited, the army could not be more than 100,000 people, limited the tanks, and well, Germany was breaking that, and Hitler knew it because the military had been training his stormtroopers. And this was illegal against, the Treaty of Versailles. I mean, France could have invaded for this, and they'd invaded for much less before. So they were sitting, and there's something else, even more they're sitting on. I mean, he's sitting on some dynamite, and so he has them. He has something on them, I should say. And so they're kind of really worried about how he's going to react because he's such a, dynamic speaker, you have to say. He knows how to target his audience very well. And so the judge is... the trial is a sensation and a scandal at the time. Now we look back and see it as a catastrophe.
Right. Tell us about how there wasn't Twitter, there wasn't Facebook, there wasn't YouTube in 1924. How did this garner attention from the public?
Well, it was they called this. One person that was with Hitler was General Ludendorff, and one of the most important generals in World War I for Germany. And in the far right, he's like a national idol. Other people say, well, actually, he is incredibly offensive, very ambitious offensives in the war, maybe doomed the country to defeat, other people would say, like particularly on the left and in the center. But on the right, he's a national hero. And so Ludendorff is also in this, the putsch. He's also on trial. So when the trial starts, Ludendorff is kind of like the main figure. Everybody's looking at Ludendorff. I mean, top general in Germany, one of the two top generals, and he's the field marshal, and he's a quarter marshal general, and he's on trial for treason. And then as the trial goes on, Hitler, who's a private first class, he's really just starts passing him up because Ludendorff gets on the stand, and he does not come across well. He's blaming everybody except himself, and Hitler, on the other hand, is taking full responsibility. So, yeah, I did this. I did it. But if not, I didn't do treason. You cannot, the real treason was Berlin. You cannot commit treason against the traitors.
So instead of saying, oh, no, I didn't do this, he embraced it, and that sort of caught the attention of him being defiant to the authorities, and then that allowed him to sort of say anything he wanted.
Yes, I mean, this really resonated in the circles, and you could see in the transcript, which is like 3,000 pages in the German original, verbatim transcript. I have a couple copies of it here, and it's fascinating. Plus, all the media coverage, you could see how Hitler, in the transcript, there's like merriment, laughter. I mean, he's really winning over the crowd with his antics. And Hitler now, because there's so much coverage from Germany, France, United States, Britain, Australia, Argentina, I mean, all over. Well, I mean, a lot of countries. And Hitler's no longer talking to the beer hall in Munich. He's talking to the biggest audience he's ever had in his life. And people are reporting it, they're listening, and he's making a lot of points with his with the audience that he's seeking out. So
what you're saying is he was good newspaper copy, and he was selling a bunch of newspapers, so the newspapers continued to cover him more and more because he was great copy. Yes, and you'll even see his name at the beginning of the trial because he's such a minor figure on the international stage. His name is misspelled often, Hitler with two T's, or they get his background wrong. They describe him as one person calls him like a general, General von Hitler or something. I mean, they're really just struggling to get his basic facts about him straight because he's not very well known. So no one took him seriously. The elites in Berlin laughed at him. They tried him for treason. They let him sprout his views. He was picked up by the media, caught some attention because he was defiant to the norms of the day, and struck a chord with the people. But he was convicted of treason, was he not?
Yes, he was. He was. The verdict came April 1st, April Fool's Day, and by the end of 1924, and by the end of December 1920th, of 1924, he's out. So he gets basically a slap on the wrist.
So he was in jail for six months for treason?
Yes, that's And even then, a fact came out. Well, it actually did not come out in the trial itself because the judge wouldn't let it come out, but it came out later. When Hitler stormed into the beer hall and made his high treason, he was already on parole. So he committed the crime while on parole. That came out later. I mean, another thing.
Right.
So, I mean, it was a perversion of justice,
Yeah.
you could say. I mean, it's really hard to describe it.
The book is called The Trial of Adolf Hitler. David King, our guest. Last question for you. Did they allow Rudolf Hess to did he transcribe Mein Kampf, or did he read Mein Kampf or write Mein Kampf, or did he transcribe it to Rudolf Hess?
That's another interesting thing, because if you look at the standard biographies, the traditional view was that Hitler dictates Mein Kampf to Rudolf Hess and some of the other people in prison. But we now know that Hitler did not do that. He typed it out himself. And I think what happened is, looking with all these wonderful prisoner and prison guard memoirs and the prison files, and I think one reason why that myth came out is because Hitler would try out his ideas. You can read Rudolf Hess' letters home describing this. When Hitler comes in over tea, they're talking about the subject, and Hitler would try it out on Hess, and he would give speeches to the prisoners. Now, I think the guards would hear that, so they thought it was kind of dictation. I think that might have been how it got
Interesting.
out.
So
we now know, I mean, you see the typewriter coming in. Hitler typed it himself and wrote it himself. I mean, he talked to these people. Hitler, we now think, one German scholar has shown this, I think, he was the first to really see that.
Yeah.
I think that Hitler really did type it himself. And
once Hitler gets out of jail, he publishes Mein Kampf. I don't know how well it does, but he's now a name, right? So he turned this sort of beer hall brigade, this obscure night in February of 1924. That's his calling card. He gets out of jail. Now he's a nationally known figure, and he's off and running. Yes. I mean, Mein Kampf it doesn't sell so well at first, but later, this is what's going to make Hitler a millionaire. This is where he gets his money later on. When he gets the power, I mean, it becomes a huge seller. Even today, the Germans did a reissue, a scholarly edition of Mein Kampf, and it's been a bestseller again too. Scholarly annotation to try to keep the Nazis from taking over, right,
and reissuing it. But yeah, this is
wow.
The trial gave him a name, and it gave him a name that was not just this associated with this failure. I mean, 20 people died, at the putsch, and so Hitler was depressed after that. He was, who's going to listen to me now? He was telling one guy that came and visited him in prison, who's going to listen to me? 20 people died. So 20 people died in this raid, and yet people were still able to look past that, give him the benefit of the doubt, excuse his actions, so he could become bigger and more powerful and do more damage later. Yes, and it's really chilling to see some of the witnesses on the stands who will say very rational terms why they like Hitler still, and even if they're not anti-Semitic. I mean, Hitler made no mistake. He did not like Jews. He's saying this at the trial, and he's very clear. And you could that was very chilling to see Hitler do it. He's not shrieking. He's just saying it very,
right.
Saying it. And then you could see these other witnesses who would say, well, here's why I like Hitler. And often they'd go in secret session when they'd say this. And one of them said, well, another war is coming. This is 1924. We have to fight another war. It's inevitable. We're going to fight France. And we need Hitler because we need to win over the working classes. And all the working classes are going to the left. After the war, after the war in Germany was in chaos at that time. And they say Hitler's the only one that can talk to him and make him nationalist again. So they justified they justified his shortcomings because they needed him. He was the only one who could take them to the promised land. He's the only one who could solve the problem of Germany. Yes, and it's I have it in the book called a dangerous game because they're willing to put up with and tolerate these excesses, as they will call it, for this influence on the street. And what's interesting is that a lot of people don't know Adolf Hitler was elected by the people of Germany. Yes, and that's another thing too, because had they followed the law, when the Great Depression hit, Hitler would have been in prison, or he would have been deported. But instead, when the Great Depression hit, in 1928, the Nazis had 2.6% of the vote. 1928. So that's 97% did not vote for him. 1932, the Depression is, just in horrific terms. 37%.
Yeah, interesting.
A little over 37%. July 32. So.
Yeah, David King, we got to go. The book is called The Trial of Adolf Hitler, and it talks about his rise to power through this trial of Adolf Hitler. David King, our guest, New York Times best-selling author. So I guess the moral of the story is it's a good thing to have the rule of law so nothing like that happens here in this country. David King, thank you for your expertise. Thank you for your time. Look forward to reading more of the book.
Thank you.